Hey guys, it's Steph here with Crafty Ladybug, and here we're working on part 2 of the sled. If you have completed part 1 of the video, you have made the sled runners, which we'll be attaching to this next section. I wanted to let you know that this part is very difficult to do, and I'm going to be doing this part in multiple steps for you. And I have created a companion guide for you to look at. It is right here. I'm not going to show that too much on screen, but this companion guide you can find on my website, www.craftyladybugcreations.com, and there you can print out a copy of this. It is watermarked with my watermarking. Please do not photocopy it and distribute that in any other way. Use it for your own personal uses in following along with this tutorial. So to begin our sled, it's going to be our loom set up in its straight configuration, 9 looms across, 9 rows, and I've got the arrows pointing from the left going towards the right. The first part that we're going to do is to lay out this portion right here, and if you're following along with my instruction guide, that is the part that says lay these first. So I have already laid them out on the loom using 2 bands coming from the bottom peg and up 1, 2 bands going from that second peg up over on a diagonal, 2 bands, 2 bands, 2 bands coming over again to the outside edge, 2 bands, 2 bands, and 2 bands going from the second down over on a diagonal again. So if you're following along with the companion sheet, yours should look exactly like that. I'm doing this in bits and pieces because I don't want you guys to see me fumbling around with the bands. So I did that part first so I could get a good idea and outline of what I needed to do. Our next step is going to be to take 2 bands, and we're going to start back down here on the bottom again, and we're going to come down 1, 2, 3, 4 times with 2 bands. So 2 bands coming down once, twice, 3 times, and a 4th time. Now we need to run all of our bands going this direction from the left to the right before we move on to anything else. So we're going to take 2 bands again, and we're going to actually come down 5 times on this series. 2, 3, 4, and 5. This next row, you're actually coming down 5 times again, but it is going to be a little bit lower because we're starting off at a different spot. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Another set starting here, but we're actually going to come down 1 more, so it'll be a total of 6 sets of bands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. This next section here is actually going to come down 1 further, so it'll be a total of 7 bands coming over on that side. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. So you should have a nice little stair step looking here, kind of coming down in a diagonal area. Our next row is actually going to start here at the top, and it is going to go all the way over to the end. So we're just going to run 2 bands all the way down that column or that row. And this project is pretty large. It will take a lot of bands and it will take a lot of time. But I had multiple requests for this, and everyone wanted to see it. Everybody wants to make it. So I decided to put this video out. Even though I know some of you are going to say it's too hard, blah, 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 blah. Okay. Our next row here, if you're following along with the companion guide, will tell you to come all the way down to the end on this row. And it's still 2 bands this whole entire time. And I will try to put the direct link to that companion guide in the description box below, or give you a link to click on it somehow. There you go. And the next row is going to come all the way down, except for we're not going to do the very last set. So we're just moving that down. And this is the fun part, the laying of the bands. Just keep continuing to lay all the way to the next to the last set. You want your last set to be open, so no bands there. Next row, 2 bands again, starting from where it indented here, and we're actually going to come in twice. We're not going to do the last 2 on that piece. My little companion guide even tells you where to lay the horizontal bands, which will be our next step after we get done laying these guys. So here we've skipped the last 2. You don't want to put bands on the last 2. And now we need to do this portion of the sled. And if you're looking at the companion guide, comparison guide, it's going to tell you to lay these next. And we got these to run also. So we can do one of 2 things. Let's actually follow along with the companion guide where it tells you to lay this set next, which will be 2 bands that we're going to connect each of these diagonal pieces with those 2 bands. And then right here, we're going to take 2 bands also to fill that area in and connect that up there. Now we're going to work on this side and finish up our little point, which will be 2 bands filling in here, 2 bands filling in that diagonal, and we need to connect these 2 here. And then we're going to run bands all the way up this edge, but kind of in the opposite direction of what we were doing before. So you want them to come from the top, and we're working back towards our body again. Once again, this is just 2 bands. And then we need to count in 2 rows, 1, 2, and where this area intersects right here, we're going to place 2 bands there, and we're going to do 2 bands above that, and then we're going to fill this area in right here with 2 bands on the horizontal. And here I'm actually doing it as a diagonal. So a little tricky in that spot. And our last thing that we need to do is to take and cap this off at the end. This is where we're going to start to loop. We need to cap that off with a 3-time cap band. 1, 2, and 3. And our next step will be to lay the horizontal bands. which I need to take a small break right here and get some more rubber bands laid out. So I will be right back with you, but take a minute and make sure yours looks pretty similar to that before we move on to laying the horizontal bands. All right, let's begin by laying the horizontal bands. I'm going to start right here where you want to take a single band and we're going to run it from the second row over. We don't need to do any here because they're going to be connected as we loop. I'm going to pick up there on that last peg and I'm going to connect over 3. And I'm going to start there and I'm going to go up to the end. I'm going to start back down here at the beginning again, or no, what I call the first row. And that's going to be the same thing, 3, 3, 3, and 3. Again with 3, and I'm just pushing these down some so that they don't get in the way. Next row will be 3, 3, across 3, and across 3. This last set will be across 3 again, across 3 again, 3 again, 3 again, and here we are going to start with 3 and 3, and we're going to do 4 on this one. Doesn't really make that big of a difference, but we had to do 4. And then we'll move down one more row, and that'll be 3 and 3 and 3. Moving down again. This one's going to be a little bit trickier because I want you guys to do 4 the first time. So we're going to do 1, 2, 3, 4, and then we're going to do 3. This next one will be 3 and 3. This set here, we're going to grab all 4. This set here, we're going to grab all 4. And last but not least, for the horizontal bands, we're going to grab 3 right there. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, now we are ready to loop our sled, our side of our sled. I need to reset my camera because as I loop, I need to turn my sled this way. And you guys will not be able to see the bottom of it because of the way I have my camera situated at the current moment. So I'm going to refigure my camera and I will be right back with you. So this is how we were, and I turned it this way to begin looping, but I do need to turn it one more time so that our sled looks like this. And we need to start by attaching our runners. Would have been a shame to loop that whole thing shut and forget to put the runners in. So let's get our leg runners out and we're going to get those ready to put on our sled creation. I'm taking the longer portion of the runner here, that first set, and I'm going to push my hook through there to recover that opening. Here's my opening of the loop. And I'm taking off my black holding band. And I'm going to stretch that over this peg right here where it starts to go up at the diagonal. That's where your first one's going to go. Our next one, we're going to skip 2 pegs and it's going to go on the 3rd here. So I'm reaching in again and I'm reclaiming the center of that loop. And to make life easier, we can actually just pop that on the loom and then take off our holding hook as it's on the loom. That does make life a little bit easier. Oops, and forgive me. I went to 2, I need to go out to 3. So I need to pick that back up and move that onto the 3rd one away. So first one here, skip 2, so it goes on the 3rd. Skip 2, and I need to put it on the 3rd here. So I'm just reaching in, going 1, 2, and over to the 3rd. And I'm just going to take off my holding hook or my holding band And if you use toothpicks or other hooks to hold them with, might be easier for you. I actually am just going to snip off this black band because I have a ton of black bands, so I'm just going to snip it off. And then I'm reclaiming again on the last one. And can anybody guess what we need to do? We need to skip 2 and go right there. So get that on. And I did not pierce through the exact center, but there we go. Once again, I'm just snipping off that holding band. Be careful if you decide to snip it that you don't cut your gold bands. And now we have this weird looking sled, but it's going to look good once it gets done. We need to rotate our loom again to begin to loop. Okay guys, I have told you something a little incorrectly and I didn't realize it until after I got my legs on. So as we're about to start to loop, I noticed I made a mistake. So what I want you guys to do is to take off your bands that were here at the bottom. They kind of came out to a point on the single row here, and there was a layer of bands right in here. I want you to pause the video here and make sure that your loom looks like this before we begin. And I'm so sorry about this, but I can't go back and redo this whole video again just because of this one mistake. But we need to make sure our loom looks like this. So we have our 2 diagonals and then 1 piece across here. Take your bands that you had laid, and I want you to count over from your right going to the left. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then I want you to count up 1. That is where we need to lay 2 bands coming across like so. I had just messed up the order that I laid them in, and it wasn't allowing me to loop it correctly as I started to loop. I need you to go from the one that you just laid over again, straight over. We're still forming the same shape, we're just rearranging the way that they had gotten laid. Here, I want you to fill that area in with a single band. Here on the diagonal, I want you to do that set of bands. Now, something else that you should have taken off in order to get to this band here was your horizontal piece. Your single horizontal needs to get laid back across those 3. And now we can finish laying our bands across the bottom. And this is going to allow me to loop in the correct configuration. And I told you this was difficult and complicated, and I really I put off doing the video for so long because I knew it was so difficult and complicated. There we go, we're back to our point, and our cap band needs to go there, which was a 3-time cap band. 1, 2, and 3. So now we're all back to the same starting point. Now we can begin to loop. By looping, we're going to push our hook in, grabbing those 2 bands and come to the right. Reach in the bottom 2 bands and come to the right again. We're going to reach in and grab our next 2 bands, which are going to come to the right. And still reach into that peg, and you're going to grab the bottom 2 bands, which come up to that diagonal. We're going to reach into that diagonal. Actually, we're not going to go into that diagonal. We're going to come back down here at the bottom first. We're going to work our way up this edge to this point. And we'll come back down here to these guys. So we're going to reach in, grabbing the 2 bands, move over to the right. Your next 2 bands that are on the top 2 bands, come over to the right. And you still have 2 bands underneath it here. I want you to loop those straight forward. Loop those straight forward 1 time. And that connects and interlocks that area right there. Next set of 2 bands that are closest to the top. Come over to the right, and we're going to carry these last 2 bands in that peg straight forward. Reach over here again. These top 2 bands are going off to the right diagonal, and this portion here, bottom 2 bands, are coming straight forward. Next, we're going to work on this diagonal here, reaching in, grabbing those top 2 bands, and be careful because you have a horizontal band in there, and carry that off to the right diagonal. Now we need to loop this whole area of the leg up to this point here. We need to stop. I'm sorry, I keep forgetting to show you guys. We need to stop at this point right here. So this is just going to be straight looping, reaching in, pushing back everything there, including the gold from the legs, grabbing your bottom 2, come forward, bottom 2, forward, bottom 2, and forward. We're back to where all that gold is again. Reach in through everything, grab your bottom 2, come forward, bottom 2, forward, 2 and forward, into a messy spot, 2 and forward, 2 and forward, and 2 and forward, and we're going to stop right there on that gold because I need to do these other ones first. Okay, and by now your loom is going to be doing the same thing that mine is. Mine is pivoting. It's pivoting in towards the center because there's so much tension on here. We may get to a point where we have to hold it down with our hand. And I'm really sorry about that, but if that happens, my hand's going to be in the way sometimes. But let's begin back down here at the end where we sort of left off. You're going to reach in and you're going to grab those 2, this 2 horizontal here. We're going to reach in and move it over to the right. And I just lost both of those bands. These bands are so slippery. I'm using the Rainbow Loom Jelly Red, and they are really slippery. And reach in and you want to grab the bottom 2 bands. Reach in through all that mess. There's a little bit of a mess there. Bottom 2 bands over to the right. And now we're intersecting with this area right here. And we're going to reach in, grabbing everything that's there, and we're going to loop forward once. And we're going to come over here to this piece, and we're going to reach into the bottom 2 bands and loop forward once. We're going to come to this peg here. We're going to reach in and loop forward once. And then we're going to come back to this point right here, and we're going to loop forward the bottom 2 bands once. And we're going to move over again, bottom 2 bands. Bottom 2 bands. And we don't need to do this row because we've already done it. On this set of bands, we've met a diagonal. You need to reach in and grab the top 2 and carry that diagonal over to the left slightly. Then we're going to reach in again and grab the bottom 2 bands. And that's going to come straight forward. Working in again, bottom 2 bands come straight forward. Bottom 2 bands come straight forward, and that one we've already gotten because we did that when we looped the legs. I'm going to start back over here again, grabbing the top 2 bands, which will go on the diagonal to the left. Bottom 2 bands coming up to the peg in front of it. Reaching in, and we're just going to work our way across again, being sure to push back your horizontal bands. And that one we've already gotten. Back over here again, doing your left or left band. Band's going off to the left on the diagonal. Reach all the way in and get your bottom 2 bands coming forward. And then we're going to work our way across again. And I really hope your bands aren't as slippery as mine. I find it a little difficult to work with this texture of a band. And that one we don't need because we've already done that with the leg portion. Back up here to our diagonal piece. Carry that off to the left. Reaching in, bottom 2, come straight forward, 2 and forward. Pushing back your horizontals as you get to them. You do not want to grab your horizontal bands in these. Bottom 2 and forward. And we got the end one, and now my board is really pivoting. Coming back over here to where the diagonal is again. And I need to reach in and get those top 2 bands. I'm carrying that off to the left. I'm going to reach in again and get the bottom 2 bands. They're going to come forward. And again forward. Forward, and we're working our way all the way across the loom. And there we go. Don't need to do that one because we did that with the leg. Reach in again on the leftmost side and come straight forward. And then we're going to loop right across. And by now your hands are going to be pretty busy and tired too, because you should be holding your loom down. It's really starting to pull and tense up. So don't think something's wrong. Just make sure that your pegs don't fall off, because if they fall off and slip up, you're going to be really mad at me and blame me. Back over here again. And we're going to do this until we get to our last row of things. And sure to push back. And all I'm simply doing is pushing back my horizontal bands to reach my bottom 2 bands. If you are attempting this, I'm going to assume you're an expert loomer, and you kind of assume that you need to push back your horizontal bands because you know what to do with them. Back over here again. We're almost done the looping part. Yay! Okay. And I'm going to stop right there after doing those 2 because I want to come and finish up the last 2 in this row. Because then when we get to connecting the side piece, it's going to be a little different. So now back down here again, and you just want to make sure that you are making everything turn into a teardrop. Got our last teardrop on that piece, and our last teardrop on this piece, and in here we're going to have to make sure we do 2 teardrops in a row, and that'll finish off these pieces. Teardrop, push back and teardrop, push back and teardrop, push back and teardrop. Okay, so everything is pretty much looped up with the exception of our last portion of the leg here. Do not forget that last portion of the leg. If you do, it's gonna fall apart. And yep, you will be cursing me left and right. But I reminded you to reach in there, grabbing those bottom 2 and move it over on that diagonal. Push back, grabbing the bottom 2, and these are going to come off to the left side, and I need to relieve a little bit of tension on that one. So I'm just taking my hook and running it around the peg to relieve some tension. Reach in, grabbing your bottom 2. There's bottom 2 bands, and they're going over to the left. This is coming left and down. These bottom 2 bands are going to come down 1 peg and to the left, opposite of the way that we laid them. Reach in there, and we got a horizontal band coming up. 2 bands actually going over to the left. Reach in, 2 bands coming over to the left. And we got this diagonal to finish up here. Reach in, grabbing the bottom 2 bands, And I'm having a hard time getting to my bottom two. So much on that peg. They're my bottom two. Diagonal and up to the left. And our last piece, reaching in. 2 over to the horizontal on the left. And this is going to be where we need to tie it off. I would recommend that you use a same color band as your sled, so the red band. And I'm going to reach in there and I'm going to just tie this off as a slip knot. And then we're going to proceed to take the item off the loom. We can do that by using our hook, and you want to take it off the loom using your hook. Don't just rip it off, because you're going to be really mad at me if it breaks. And we worked really hard on this, and I have worked really hard on this tutorial, that we don't want your things to break. So be sure to use your hook in assisting you to get it off the loom. And it is got quite a bit of tension in some areas. And it's going to take you forever to get it off. But once we do, we'll be able to release some of that. Wherever there's a lot of tension, you want to use your hook. So basically wherever there's a leg, you want to use your hook. And just get it off the best that you can without actually ripping it right off the loom. Because, as I said, if a band breaks, 2 bands break. 1 band breaks, it's not so bad. 2 bands break, you're in trouble. Back down here again, I do want to use the back of my hook just because there's so much tension down here, and it's not real thick, but there's a lot of bands in some areas. And voila! We have got the first side of your sled. Just pull and stretch things out a little bit. Now if you wanted a 2D sled, or one-dimensional sled, I guess this is one-dimensional, this would be your one side of the sled. Or if you're just tired and you don't feel like making another one, that's what you're going to get. In order to make this curl, you would just bend it up a little bit, but I'm actually making a second portion. If you need to make the 3D sled, you have to make another one of these. So that means you hit the video stop here and you rewind it, rewind this video, you follow the same exact instructions, and you make your second side. And then once you get your second side made, we'll gather back up and we will assemble the bottom and place the 2 edges together, which in itself is going to be another nightmare. So prepare yourself, grab your cup of coffee, your hot tea, your caffeinated beverage, because we still got a little bit to go. I'll see you soon.